Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome to the Drive-In Double Feature Movie Review. Today we're going to be reviewing the 1997 release of Chasing Amy by Kevin Smith. And with me, as always, is Ted.
Your mother's a tracer.
And Ken.
This is going to end badly.
Of course it will. And I'm your host, Eric. What's a Nubian? Ken, what did this movie do in the box office?
All right, Chasing Amy. It was released by Miramax Films on April 4th, 1997. Has a running time of 113 minutes. The budget on this movie was $250,000. It made $12 million. It was directed and written by Kevin Smith, and it stars Ben Affleck as Holden McNeil, Joey Lauren Adams as Elisa Jones, Jason Lee as Banky Edwards, Dwight Ewell as Hooper X, Jason Mewes as Jay, and Kevin Smith as Silent Bob.
Wonderful. What did the movie critics think of this movie?
Well, Chasing Amy received positive reviews from critics. Rotten Tomatoes reported a certified fresh approval rating of 87% based on reviews from 84 critics, with a rating average of 7.31 out of 10. According to the site's summary of the critical consensus, Chasing Amy explores gender roles, sexual morals, and the limit of friendships, with a mixture of sensitivity, raw honesty, and director-screenwriter's Kevin Smith's signature raunchy humor. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 3.5 out of 4 stars, saying, "While the surface of the film sparkles with snap, iconic dialogue, deeper issues are forming, and Chasing Amy develops into a film of touching insights. Most romantic comedies place phony obstacles in the way of true love, but Smith knows that at some level, there's nothing funny about being in love. It is dead serious business, in which your entire being is at risk." Ebert believed that this was an improvement over Smith's previous effort, Mallrats, and he added that Adams was a discovery. Charles Taylor, writing for Salon, Chasing Amy isn't going to single-handedly save romantic comedy, but Smith has made the only romantic comedy in quite a while that acknowledges, even celebrates, the fact that love and sex are emotional anarchy. Writing in Time Out New York, Andrew Johnston observed, "Chasing Amy, Kevin Smith's third feature, does to romantic comedy what Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's Spider-Man did to superhero comics in the 60s. It makes a tired genre nearly irrelevant by giving its characters motivations and problems that seem real." And then Gary Thompson of the Philadelphia Daily News said, "The movie reinforces his gift for dialogue, but his ability to handle actors, compose scenes, or keep track of his own story is negligible."
Ted, plot summary.
Well, Chasing Amy tells us the story of two friends, Banky Edwards and Holden McNeil. They've created a successful comic book series, Blunt Man and Chronic. At a comic book convention, they are introduced to another comic book creator, Elisa Jones. Elisa, Banky, Holden, and another friend, Hooper, go and hang out at a bar after the convention is over. This is where Holden believes that he and Elisa have shared a mutual attraction. The next day, Hooper invites Holden, by request of Elisa, to come out to a party at a nightclub. Banky, of course, tags along with Holden to the nightclub. At the party, Elisa meets up with Holden and is called up on stage to sing a song. She sings a love song, and Holden believes that she is singing to him. However, when the song is over, Elisa leaves the stage and kisses her girlfriend, revealing that she is a lesbian. A shocked Holden is dismayed, takes Banky, and leaves the party. A few days later, Elisa shows up at the loft that Banky and Holden share to try and reconnect with Holden. After a long discussion, they decide that they should at least remain friends because they have many mutual interests, and they are from the same Tri-City area in New Jersey. Holden and Elisa begin hanging out with each other a lot over the next few months. A confused Banky doesn't understand why Holden is hanging around with Elisa when there's no chance for a relationship. Holden then admits to Banky that he's in love with Elisa. One night, after hanging out with Elisa, Holden decides to admit to her that he is, in fact, in love with her and wants to know if she feels the same way. Elisa confesses to Holden that those feelings are complicated for her to deal with, and it's not as easy as her just saying, "I love you." After walking away from Holden, she returns and kisses him. The next morning, Banky walks in on Holden and Elisa sleeping together in the loft's living room. her. Holden admits to Banky that he and Alyssa did have sex, and they are going to give a relationship a try. Banky is upset and worried about his friend getting hurt in the process of the new relationship. Banky has always said that he has Holden's back. In an effort that he believes to protect Holden, Banky goes out and finds information about Alyssa's past love life. Holden refuses to believe the information that Banky has found and gets angry at Banky for snooping in Alyssa's past. The information, though, eats at Holden, and he foolishly confronts Alyssa about it. When she confirms that the information is in fact true, Holden is devastated, and he leaves her at the hockey rink. The next day, Holden meets Jay and Silent Bob at a diner. He is meeting them to give them the money that he and Banky owe them for likeness rights, because they are the direct inspiration for Blunt Man and Chronic. During their conversation, Holden reveals that he can't get over Alyssa's past love life. Silent Bob then tells a moving story of his lost love, and Holden has an epiphany. Holden brings Banky and Alyssa together at the loft. His solution to his issues and the issues between all three of them is for them all to sleep together. A mortified and hurt Alyssa admits that she did love Holden, but he has hurt her too much. Banky is shocked by what his friend has proposed and leaves the apartment. Fast forward to a year later at a comic book convention. We learn that Banky has a new comic book he is drawing because he and Holden have stopped writing Blunt Man and Chronic. Holden is at the convention as well, and he has been drawing a new comic, Chasing Amy, which is about his experiences with Alyssa. Holden makes amends with Alyssa by giving her the comic to read, and in the comic, he does apologize to Alyssa. They part then, saying that they will keep in touch.
Thank you, Ted. That's a great plot summary there.
No problem.
Almost as long as the movie.
Wow. I can't believe this movie is 23 years old. It almost seems like yesterday when it was in the theaters. So I did see this movie on video. I did not see it in the theaters. I wish I would have. What about you guys? Where did you first see it?
It was a video that I did rent from, I believe it was probably Blockbuster at the time. It was after I had really gotten into Kevin Smith movies. I always tried to seek out his releases whenever they did come out. And like I said, I grew up in a small town, so our local theater, when the movie came out, didn't get a screening of it at our local movie theater, so I had to wait for video and be able to see it.
For me, it was years later after its release. For whatever reason, I didn't watch it right away. It may have been because of the subject matter, or at that time, I wasn't really into chick flicks, and I thought this was maybe a combination of both. Until just recently, I hadn't even watched this movie in 15 years.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Ken. With the name Chasing Amy, and you look at the cover of the VHS or the DVD or the Blu-ray, it does almost scream kind of a chick flick in a way. You weren't sure what Kevin Smith was going to give you at the time, but I haven't seen the movie probably in 4 or 5 years prior to just watching it again a couple days ago. And it really sets it apart from some of the other Kevin Smith movies that are out there. This one, I believe, is the third one in the series there.
Yes.
And what do you guys think of these characters as compared to some of the other Kevin Smith movies out there? Are they likable? Can you relate to them? What are some of your thoughts on them?
Well, I think this flows better than Clerks. I feel the dialogue here is even more real than in any other movie Kevin Smith has done. I compare Alyssa to Penny Lane from Almost Famous. Joey Lauren Adams just brightens up every scene that she's in. She just does a great job. I think Holden and Banky are okay. I think Ben Affleck does a good job. This might be my favorite role for him. Jason Lee also does a fine job here as the friend who is conflicted with saving his romance and being worried about his friend. I would have liked to see that played out a little bit more. You gotta love Dwight as Hooper X. The question and answer session at the Comic-Con is just classic. It's just awesome.
Did I hear you right? Did you say this is your favorite Ben Affleck character in a movie?
I'm glad you said that, Eric. I was about ready to ask the exact same question because
is that what you meant?
That's kind of
wow.
That's a pretty big statement.
Well, look at what
I think this is one of his weakest roles.
What do you have to choose from besides maybe Good Will Hunting?
I think you just hit the nail on the head there with Good Will Hunting. First off,
are you talking about this iteration of Ben Affleck or
anything he's ever done in his career?
The more recent, because his role in The Town is pretty good.
What about The Accountant? The Accountant.
The Accountant is pretty good as well, and so is Argo. I mean,
Argo is incredible.
Well, I haven't seen The Town. So
you have not seen The Town?
I have not seen The Town, no.
You need to jump on Netflix after we're done recording and go watch The Town.
As far as the accountant goes, I think basically anybody could have played that role.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I think so.
That role was made for him. I think he's better in Dazed and Confused than he was in this.
I think there's some really good acting here from him. And maybe I'd give you Argo. The thing with Good Will Hunting, though, is that's Matt Damon's vehicle. That's not Ben Affleck. This is a Ben Affleck vehicle. I just like him in this movie a lot.
Okay, let's hold the phone right here. Have you seen his most recent movie, The Way Back?
I have.
He was really good there.
He was.
Do you want to go to Gone Girl? I mean, come on.
Company Men. The movie Company Men is a phenomenal movie. It's one of my favorites.
Is good. I love Gone Girl. I think that's one of the most brilliant movies.
So we're saying here that Ben Affleck is not good in this movie.
I'd say he's one of the weaker characters.
I think he's good in this movie, but by saying that this is one of his best performances of all time, I mean, that means that basically you've said that he peaked at like the third movie he's ever made.
Here's a better way of putting this. This is the Ben Affleck character that I can relate to the most. How's that? Is that a better way of saying? And I appreciate his acting in this character because I can relate to that. The other characters that you guys are talking about that you like more, I get it, but I don't connect with those other characters like I connect with him.
So you like him, of all the Kevin Smith movie roles, this is your favorite role?
Yes, by far.
Without a doubt.
By far.
Holden McNeil is your favorite Kevin Smith character?
No, this is my favorite Ben Affleck character in the Kevin Smith movies.
Okay, that's a good, because I have very strong opinions about Holden McNeil.
Oh, yeah, and we'll talk about this, but I have a total problem with the last third of the movie, and it's mainly about him.
Well, let's get into that.
Yeah, let's talk about Holden McNeil.
Holden McNeil, for the first part of the movie, you sympathize with him. You get it. Then, after he professes his love to Alyssa, he turns into an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
He turns into a complete and utter jerk. And I have no sympathy for him after he professes his love. I even have a problem that he professes his love to her, because it's not fair what he did. It's completely selfish. I get that she ends up changing her life. And this is a big problem that I have with the movie. She changes her life for this guy.
Lifestyle, everything.
Exactly. Turns it upside down. And this guy is so shallow that he can't get over himself over something that took place over 10 years ago.
Well, like they said in the movie, her sexual, and I think Hooper said this, is you're not going to be able to, or no, Banky, you're not going to be able to relate to things that she's seen and done in her life.
And nor should he. You either love the person regardless of what they did. You like the person, not what they did. What he did was so selfish and so crappy. When Holden makes his next appearance after chasing Amy in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, he's an asshole there too.
Yeah, he is.
He is.
In my opinion, that's Kevin Smith admitting that this guy is a asshole.
Which ruins the ending because it looks like he's remorseful and everything, but then in the next movie, he's not. But here's the thing. I'm not sure if I've ever been this character, but I can relate to this character a little bit. Now, at the beginning of the movie, we see that when he is interested in Alyssa, that he's excited, he thinks he's going to get some. He's not mature to have a relationship at this particular point in his life. He's got the comic book thing going. He probably shouldn't even be in a strong relationship. And I will disagree with you on the fact that she changes everything for him. She fell in love with him too. She changed because she was in love, not because he made her change. She changed because she was in love.
Well, see, now you've opened up a whole can of worms about can people change their sexuality in the drop of a hat.
Well, she's obviously bisexual. She does fall in love with him, and I fully understand that. Holden McNeil might be the most self-centered character Kevin Smith has ever written, based off of the fact he is so delusional that he believes that he's the only guy she's ever been with. That is complete and utter lunacy. He has to be smarter than that. And for him to take somebody and admit that he has feelings for him, which is fine, but then to have no understanding or care so little about them after doing that, that is so selfish. And this is coming from somebody who, as you're going to find out at the end when we do our ratings, I love this movie. He's an asshole. He's selfish. He is self-centered. And if you want to get into the end, his idea of how to fix things between the three of them is completely and utterly self-serving. He doesn't care about the feelings of Alyssa or Banky. He wants these people to cater so he can be comfortable.
He wants everyone to like each other and be no issues.
That's not life.
It doesn't make sense. This is where I have a problem with Kevin Smith at this point, because
and who gave him this advice?
Yeah,
it surely wasn't Silent Bob out of that awesome soliloquy that he provides in the diner. That is an awesome speech. And the thing that he took out of that speech was that the three of them should sleep together. That is complete lunacy.
It doesn't make any sense. Why does Kevin Smith go this route? I don't see this happening in any type of relationship out there. I mean, it's just really crazy. But I think we're being a little too mean to him here. Because, for instance, when I was younger, late teens, early 20s, I was really into a girl who just wanted to be friends. So I was in the friend zone. And during the friend zone, the girl that I liked started showing interest in me. And then we ended up sleeping together. And once that happened, I lost interest. I wasn't trying to be a jerk, but for whatever reason, my mind just switched. And all of a sudden, I felt, how do I get out of this? So I understand a little bit when things changed for him once she accepted him, because this was kind of a challenge. Sometimes for us guys and some girls too, I would imagine, they're challenges. And once those challenges have been completed, we lose interest.
That literally makes me hate Holden even more.
Don't hate me then.
I just
your new nickname, Ken, is Holden.
Wow.
I don't see the comparisons between the two. He's ultimately fine in his relationship with her. It's not until he finds out that she had something that he should have known most likely happened, was that she did have sexual relations with a guy. I mean, that's what he can't get over. It's not even the fact that she did two guys at the same time. He can't get over the fact that he wasn't the only guy. That's his major issue here. And whereas your situation, you started to see things different. He can't get over himself. That's what breaks up their relationship, not the fact that he sees the relationship differently after she says something, because they're perfectly okay. It's the moment it's brought to his attention, and she does admit to him after he treats her like garbage in public.
But you look at what Hooper X was saying when they were in the music store. He's kind of letting him know that guys are in relationships. You like to think that you're the only one. This particular case, she's only been with women. I don't think it's the threesome that he's really having a problem with. Right. He thought that she had been with just girls all his life, and he is the man that basically took her away from all that. I was in that same situation and that happened to me, that might have messed up my mind. No sort of way would I do what he does. But think about our relationships. Have you ever had a girlfriend do things and it just plays with your mind and you start making assumptions about what might be going on? Our minds can really mess us up a lot in relationships. I think that's what's happening here. He doesn't know how to control what's in his mind. Other people are telling him great stuff, giving him good information, except for his best friend, who's basically throwing stuff at him to get him to break up with her because he's threatened by their bromance ending.
But he gets all of this good information. He gets advice from Silent Bob. He gets advice from Hooper. And response to all of this good advice is he asks the three of them, to sleep together.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
It's funny because you start off liking him. You kind of feel for him because I think most guys have been put into the friend zone by people that they were interested in. The way that he uses that sympathy, he takes a giant crap all over her. It makes you look and question what was his real intentions the entire time.
I think they were pure intentions the whole time. I mean, like I said, sometimes our mind just switches us and we act like we shouldn't act. How many times have we had to apologize for something that we did that we normally wouldn't do? And then sometimes a certain scenario will click your brain to do something relatively stupid. My problem here is he had a long time to think of this plan. He's sitting on the swing, and what he comes up with is a threesome with his girlfriend and his best friend. And in my opinion, there is no scenario where that equation comes up with this answer.
And Alyssa points it out perfectly.
She's been down that road before. It never ends well. Yeah.
Right. And she points out to him just a handful of the scenarios. And he's still shocked that neither one of them are into it. It's complete lunacy.
You all made really good points that you want to like him in the beginning of the movie. You can see from his first interaction with Alyssa that he is infatuated with her. He can't take his eyes off her. He is starstruck. He is in love with her from his first meeting, and he's trying everything in his power to really get to know her. And then obviously when he finds out that she is bisexual, lesbian, whatever it is at that point, you can kind of see the bottom fall out on it. Ken made a good point that we all do things with women, girlfriends, wives, fiancés, whatever you want to call them, that we're apologizing for. And I think he just blew a spark. He blew a gasket. He just went overboard and was not thinking. I think he's pretty immature when it comes to relationships as compared to Alyssa, who's obviously been around. She's been with multiple partners, multiple relationships in general. And I don't know if he's really had a lot of relationships to build off of. And his immaturity really starts to creep up in this as you get to know him more in the movie.
Alyssa, though, kind of feeds this fire a little bit. I mean, he walks away from this relationship and she comes to his place to strike up a friendship. And that's kind of hard for him. She knows that he is interested in her sexually. She had a connection with him at the bar and wanted to continue with that. And for him, that was probably not the right thing for this character to do, is to have a relationship with a girl that he's extremely attracted to. In my opinion, almost in a no-win situation. How are you going to have a relationship with somebody that you really want to just have a special relationship with? He's working that throughout the whole time, and their bond just gets stronger and stronger, and he likes more and more about her. And what's not to like? I mean, Alyssa Jones, she's kind of the girlfriend we all want outside of being a lesbian. She is fun in every scene that you see in. And even the way she kind of like rats him out in front of everybody at the hockey game when he's trying to get her to confess to the crime, basically, of sleeping with two guys 10 years ago. She blurts it out to everybody. And I just love the way that she just puts it all out there.
I agree. And we've probably hammered Holden to death. But as far as Alyssa goes, she's my favorite character in the entire movie. As much as a person can relate to a character in a movie, she's the character that I relate to. She's kind, and I believe her intentions are always in the right direction. She sees Holden as somebody she could be friends with. I'm not going to sit here and fault her for wanting to be friends with Holden. I mean, she saw somebody she had a connection with, obviously had a different connection than what he wanted to. But he should have known that there's no way that this can work. But here again, we've all been in that position where it's better to be friends than not be anything at all. She is just a really awesome character. To touch real quick, we mentioned in Clerks, the whole thing with her past indiscretions. This is a larger picture of the conversation that Dante and his girlfriend have and Veronica have when he's painting her nails and he finds out that she had oral sex with 37 other guys.
Okay, which one is worse? Which one would freak you out more?
Here's the thing. It's the same idea. It's all in the past. Mm-hmm. Here's where Dante, and I know we hammered Dante a lot when we reviewed Clerks, Dante's more advanced than Holden is because Dante takes the advice that Randall gives him, I wasn't 36, and he is able to get past it. Now, he has other hangups with another girlfriend, and that's neither here nor there. But the situation between Veronica and him is ended, essentially, and he moves past it, whereas Holden can't get past it. He's so absorbed. Exactly. Yeah, thank you.
I think Dante's the same character. We see in Clerks too, Dante's still having those issues, and it's all about, Dante is also still all about him. I think these characters are exactly the same. The only difference, Dante dealing with a girlfriend that went down on 37 different guys is more challenging than the threesome because they were probably more recent, whereas Alyssa did hers 10 years ago. So I give Dante credit for that, but I think they're both extremely immature.
I do like Joey Lauren Adams in this as Alyssa Jones. Everything that Ted said is correct. She is truthful, honest, sincere. There's nothing you cannot like about her. I mean, she is without a doubt almost a perfect character, but when it comes to me, I'm more of the comic and the sarcastic wit. So I'm going to roll over to Banky Edwards on this one. I just like his sarcasm and his wit and how he just goes completely over the top on everything. You know, when we're talking about Archie, you know, the comic book, and he just goes completely ballistic on it. He takes everything to a higher tier. The same in Mallrats, too. I mean, he's just completely over the top. He's a little more mature in this one, but he's still just taking everything personal, like it's a personal attack on him, and he just wants to show that he is right, and he's doing it in such a hysterical way. He's my favorite character.
By the way, Archie was the bitch, and Jughead was the butch.
Mr. Weatherby.
And Banky is a different character than Brody.
Yes, he is a different character, but if you look at them, though, if you look at them side by side, well, no. I know it's a different character, but if you look at their characteristics, if you look at the way their acting style is, it is almost literally the same character. You could interchange them and you wouldn't see much difference. Clearly, Brody is younger, obviously. You can tell. Banky is obviously a little bit older. He's living on his own. He's got a job. I almost think, in my opinion, that Brody is almost like a little bit of an afterthought of Banky being an older character of him.
I kind of disagree. Banky's goal is to end the relationship. I don't think Brody...
Well, he feels threatened.
He feels threatened. I don't think Brody would ever feel threatened about a relationship with his friend and his relationship with his girlfriend. So I think in those aspects, they're different. Brody had a lot more sarcasm, a lot more comments than actually Banky's does here. In fact, I want to see more Banky and Hold'em and them talking about their friendship. I felt like there wasn't enough there to kind of draw this out. I enjoyed the conversation they have on the stairs when Banky walks in on them sleeping on the floor, or was it on the couch?
On the couch, yeah.
The couch is on the floor.
The only thing we really know about their friendship is really their work-related stuff.
Right. And so I would have liked to see more, because then they go down there and they are talking on the steps and he goes, "This is not going to end well. I know you." Only here are we getting an idea of what kind of a relationship they have. And it's really not expounded more. And I think if it was, then I could even see even more connection with these characters.
Okay, well, now this leads into a question that I have about Banky. Does Banky have Holden's back, or is he deliberately trying to undermine Holden's happiness with Alyssa?
Banky thinks he has Holden's back. You're right. It's both. His intentions are pure in his own eyes. He doesn't realize that what he's doing is somewhat hateful and mean. It's pretty much how he probably reacts with everyone.
I agree. And this is the crazy part where I rip on Holden so much, but I relate to Banky more. I'll get into why in the second question that I have, but here I completely am in agreement. I think that he believes his intentions are pure in trying to find out all of this information for Holden, because he thinks then Holden, with all of the information, can make a better decision, or a decision that he wants him to make.
I don't think he realizes that Holden is in love as hard as he is.
I don't doubt that either.
I think he does. And I think that's where his protectiveness comes from. In some aspects, he's like, this is not going to end well, because he knows how much invested he is into this girl. And maybe it's the bromance, maybe it's like a motherly love. It's hard to, tell, because like I said, they don't expand on the relationship here between these two. I needed more backstory. We do find out they went to school together, but I needed more of that. And then I think it could have been a much bigger issue when he came down to the end, even though I still don't agree with the threesome idea. It's then a little bit more biting, because you've seen how much they've gone through together up to this point.
Yeah, a lot of their relationship is understood by the audience. You're supposed to take it for granted that they are really close.
But at the beginning of the movie, it almost doesn't seem like. It seems like they are a strong working relationship, that they're not really that close. As an audience, you have to imagine that they're close. But I would like to have seen a little bit more on screen to pull me in so I could care at the end of this relationship what happens to him and Banky. But I do enjoy the end of the movie where he is signing his new comic and sees Hold'em and they're doing those looks and hand gestures, and I love it. It might be one of my favorite parts of this whole movie is that, along with the Q&A at the Comic-Con.
The Black Power rally.
Oh, that in itself, I think, is the highlight for me of the movie.
It's worth the price of admission.
What is the Nubian? And just the fact that's all like staged a little bit.
Entirely.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And in fact, if we want to talk about favorite characters outside of maybe Alyssa Jones, Hubrax is my favorite character in this movie. His dialogue is awesome. He's probably the best written character in this movie, maybe.
That's definitely debatable, and I don't disagree. Hooper's definitely one of my favorite characters, too. As we're looking at Banky, getting in depth into his character, one of the questions that I have for you guys is Banky repressed or naive?
Or both.
In my opinion, Banky is both. Banky is sheltered for the most part growing up in suburban New Jersey, along with Holden. I mean, it's both where they grew up. We know Alyssa grew up with them and eventually left. I think she even lives in New York City and her life has just expanded out. Yeah, no, he's definitely repressed and he's naive, especially with all the questions that they ask her about her sexual activities.
Well, we look at naive. Look at when they go to the club. What is it called? The Meow
Club. Meow Mix.
And he says, oh, there's a lot of chicks here. They don't realize that they're in a lesbian bar.
No.
Right.
That right off gives us an idea of how naive they are. And then, of course, they ask the questions. And then insensitive slurs, especially when it comes to Banky. Yeah. Banky basically is even using those words while he's playing a hockey game at home.
Right.
And so these guys, they've been in Catholic school. They probably found common ground together in comics. We all know about comics and being nerdy. You shelter yourself around a comic book type of area. All your life is about the comics. This is just me kind of building on what I think their characters are based on what I see on the screen. But I think this is what's happened to them up to that point.
There's no doubt in my mind they are not worldly. They are confined to their own little world. And you can tell that just based on how they talk. But I guess I missed my point when I was asking if he's repressed. Is Banky gay?
I don't know if he's gay. Now, when someone accuses him of being gay or characters in comic books of being gay, he goes completely off the rails and defends it.
Thou protesteth too much?
There is that argument. And then when the threesome was brought up on the couch, he did agree to it. Is he going to back out of it at the last minute? I don't know.
Well, it depends on what they look at as the threesome. I mean, is there penetration between the two guys? I don't know if we want to even go there. It's a totally different podcast.
It's kind of irrelevant, too. It really is. I mean, it would just be literally them all in a threesome, whichever route they want to go.
But I think this goes back to him being naive and ignorant when it comes to sexual orientation.
Well, now, if I remember right, I believe Alyssa Jones was accusing him of being repressed, too.
Hooper does it.
Yes, all the time.
Constantly.
But think of the theme of this movie. This whole movie rolls around homosexuality and bisexuality. The whole movie plot is that in one way or another. But that's the whole plot of the movie.
They're egging them on when it comes to sexual orientation. They're having fun with it, I think.
I think Hooper is just trying to push his buttons because he knows he can get a rise out of him, and I think he enjoys getting a rise out of him.
Well, it's very easy to get a rise out of him.
Yeah, and that's part of
in
why
more ways than one.
Right. Oh boy.
And that's part of why I do connect with Banky so much, because I was kind of that guy earlier in my life where I was easily prodded into those sort of outbursts. That's where I do understand and sympathize with Banky.
So look at how they are Catholic schoolboys and how the Catholic Church looks at homosexuality. So, and I'm not saying brainwashed or anything like that, but I come from a very Christian school background. We were told at one time that AIDS was God's retribution against homosexuals. Maybe this information planted inside his brain that there's something wrong with being homosexual, a lesbian, bisexual, whatever the case may be. And he doesn't know how to relate to that when challenged by somebody of a different sexual orientation.
You are 100% correct. And I lived that particular scenario. I completely understand where you're coming from, and that's why I can connect with Banky on that particular situation. I lived a pretty sheltered existence as well, as far as how the rest of the world operates, so to speak. It took adjustment. I think what you see of Holden at the end of the movie is that he's evolved. And I think Banky will have done the same thing. I think this experience will open their eyes. At least I hope so, because I really do like Holden and I really do like Banky, even though I was very critical of Holden.
I think Banky, though, does show that at the end when, like we talked earlier about the hand signals and stuff, he's pointing and letting Holden know that Alyssa's here and he wants him to go. So I think he's actually matured. The only problem that we see with Holden, unfortunately, is that we know that in the next movie, he's become a jerk again. You know, maybe he thought by giving her this comic book that she'd be like taking him all back, because we're seeing that it looks like she's in another relationship with another woman. Again,
she is. She clearly
is. She clearly is.
Because I think she ends up with that woman in the reboot. I think it's the same woman.
To put a cap on the whole thing, when Kevin does write Jay and Silent Bob reboot, Holden is redeemed, and you do see that he's existed into or evolved into a more well-rounded person and is more mature and can deal with a lot more complex issues because Holden and Alyssa share, we come to find out, a daughter. And so he did reach a level of maturity that far exceeds a lot of people. There is redemption for the characters, and Banky is going to be Banky, but I do think that he's going to look at things from a different light after this whole situation. And I agree with you, Ken, that I think his acknowledgement when he puts his fingers together, he's asking him, is there still a connection with them? So I think he has come to terms with a lot of them. He seems like a different person.
He's not the tracer anymore.
But he's not as volatile as he was in the beginning of the movie. I could be all wet in my assumption, but
he's got a year. It's a year later, right? Is it a year later?
Yeah, it's a year later.
So
they've also been through a lot. A lot just happened. I mean, your best friend just asked you to do a three-way with his girlfriend. There's a lot of things going on in your mind right now and a lot of things you need to sort out for the next year. But we really don't know much about him.
The last time we see Banky is he's in
The Jay
and Silent Bob Strike Back, and he is overseeing the Blunt Man of Chronic movie. The Chris Rock character in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is directing.
But we don't know much about him as far as his personal life. And I guess I would like to know more about him and what happened. Did he ever establish that friendship back with Holden? Did he get married? Did he have kids? When you talked about Holden being more mature now, sometimes being a parent does that. But at the same time, maybe he's immature and, lives through his child. What happens when the child grows up? Does he revert being a jerk again because now he doesn't have that person to be? Because sometimes when people are like that, when they can't be satisfied with just being themselves, they have to have that relationship. They have to have a girlfriend or be married or have children. They always have to have something that they lived through instead of being good with themselves. So is it possible that he didn't have that child that he would have matured? Maybe not.
Yeah.
That's 5 cents in my can. It's a Peanuts Snoopy reference if you didn't know.
So in a lot of the movies by Kevin Smith, Jay and Silent Bob kind of have a cameo role, but a very, very important role in the movie. This one is no exception in Chasing Amy. Would you have liked to see more of Jay and Silent Bob in this movie?
This is the only Kevin Smith movie that I would say no. We see Jay and Silent Bob the perfect amount because I don't think they fit with the rest of this movie. And that's so weird to say about a Kevin Smith movie. Except for when Silent Bob becomes the voice of reason and rationality. If there's one speech in the entire movie that I really like, and it might be one of my favorite speeches that Kevin Smith has written, is Silent Bob's Chasing Amy story. I don't see anything wrong with how it's written or how it's delivered. It's a perfect story or soliloquy or however you want to put it.
It is perfectly written. The one negative comment I have on it, and not on the speech itself, is the reaction from Jay. On every time he tries to get a word out edgewise, Jay makes some sarcastic, stupid comment. It's like, shut up and let him say the speech.
Right. I agree.
Actually, was one of the put-offs that I have about this. Was there was this infighting between Jay and Silent Bob, and you don't see that really in. I mean, it was like Bob wanted to beat the crap out of him sometimes for just talking. If it was me, I would have switched it. I would have rather had Jay deliver this, because I think Silent Bob is not very silent here. I think it's just a lot of dialogue. The interesting thing about this is Kevin Smith didn't feel comfortable with this because he doesn't like to memorize lines. A lot of this is ad-libbed.
But when Silent Bob talks, people listen. That's the whole point of him talking.
And it's like we've built up 2 movies to get to this, and he just talks. So it's like you've been building toward this, and the payoff is pretty perfect, in my opinion.
It is.
I love his speech, but like I said, it's so weird because when you think of a Kevin Smith movie, you think of Jay and Silent Bob. They're the characters that MTV put on there for their little skits in between music videos when MTV still had music videos.
Right.
They tied on to Jay and Silent Bob. And so you always want to see more of them, but they don't fit in this movie until that one little place where they kind of act like Holden's conscience. And even though he doesn't really pay attention to them, Silent Bob, he's probably the most rational person in the entire movie.
Jason Mewes doesn't even know that he has this relationship with this girl. I would have changed Jason Mewes to saying, not this story again, or something to that extent. It just didn't seem to fit. Your best friend, the guy that you seem to be attached to 24/7, doesn't know anything about a girl that you like. That just seems kind of weird.
Yeah, there is a continuity thing there where he says he's heard this story before, but then he seems all like he's never heard it before, too. Other than that, they are perfect in their little spot right there.
Just enough of them, right?
Right.
It was just a lot of words for Silent Bob when we only had 1 or 2 sentences from him in the other movies. And then all of a sudden you have about 2 to 3 minutes of just him talking. That's a little different. I mean, I love the dialogue. I think it's great dialogue. And we see him evolve a little bit more into the other movies. He talks a whole lot more in the reboot. But I like my Silent Bob a little bit more silent. And if he does say something, it's only a couple sentences long. Next question.
So how does this film hold up in the View-esque universe compared with other Kevin Smith movies?
This movie, to me, I think is probably Kevin's best directed movie. And I have made, throughout the course of our reviewing his movies, have said a lot about the dialogue and his writing style. But in Chasing Amy, I think he really finds himself as a director and really shows that there is a good director inside that has been waiting to come out. The 2 scenes that I think shows how he's evolved as a director. The first is the swing set scene with Holden and Alyssa. I think it's shot really well, and I think that the way that he's got them interacting with each other seems very natural, and I think that shows a good director. We don't necessarily see that all the time. Probably the best scene he's ever directed, my personal opinion, is when Holden professes his love to Alyssa in the car. He has that scene, it's set up perfectly. Having them in the car doing that profession scene like that, you feel claustrophobic, like everything's coming in on Alyssa, but you also feel the pressure from Holden. I think there's a lot going on in that scene. I think that's his best directed scene in any of his movies. It's a beautiful scene.
What do you think, Ken?
Chasing Amy is the center of this universe that we're looking at here. I'm not going to pretend to know how to pronounce the universe. But this is Kevin Smith's best writing and directing. My problems with Kevin Smith in other movies is he doesn't get the most out of his actors because I don't think he's that kind of director, unfortunately. But in this movie, he has some really good people to work with. And Ben Affleck, he does give a very strong performance in this movie. And Joey Lauren Adams is just a treasure. She reminds me so much of Kate Hudson. She never has that high arc like Kate Hudson does in Almost Famous. This is the same for Joey Lauren Adams in Chasing Amy. She is amazing, and if she was given this type of dialogue and role to work with in the future, I think she can rise to the occasion again. But as far as Kevin Smith goes, we reviewed Dogma. We went a little out of order, and I kind of almost happy we did because we saved the best for last as far as what Kevin is capable of. The problem is after these 4 movies, it disappears. He tries again, like Jersey Girl, to kind of try to do a serious film. That movie's kind of uneven a little bit for me. But yeah, I agree with everything what Ted said about the swing set scene is great. The car scene when he professes his love, which, I mean, we talked about that earlier about how selfish that is. But then again, she gives him this painting to remind him of them. But that's kind of hard for him to do because every time he's going to look at that painting, he's going to realize something that he can't have. And that was hard for him. So I understood him breaking out and saying that he loved her and why he went into that speech. And I thought the speech was a little too long, but now that I think about it, I would ramble like that to the girl that I cared about, that I was trying to like get her to fall in love with me.
I would also agree with Ted that with Kevin Smith, this is directorial masterpiece. This is his top tier when it comes to directing. With Ken that he did get everything he possibly could out of all these characters, and it all just flowed beautifully. I did really enjoy the scene when they were on the swing set discussing things. I thought that felt really natural. It almost didn't even feel like you were watching a movie. It felt like you were just looking out a window and just watching them in real life. And I also agree with Ken that going up, the row of his movies, you do this, you do Dogma, and then it's downhill from there. I like Jersey Girl, but it is nothing like the first 4 of these movies. It's not part of the universe. And I think he was just grabbing straws at that point, trying to relive his glory days of directing. But this is definitely his best. And the more I watch this movie, I watched this movie 3 times this week. And every time I watched it, I looked for more things, more details. And at the end of it, I really thought to myself, this is a great movie. This could possibly be one of my favorite Kevin Smith movies. I know in earlier reviews, I was pretty top tier on Dogma and Mallrats, but I might be rethinking a few things come the end of this podcast.
Well, okay, you guys brought up the inconsistencies after this. And this is something that's kind of come up with to me as we've been discussing here, the arc of his career as far as the directorial goes. Is he better at just doing more dialogue movie like Chasing Amy or like Clerks rather than a studio movie? Whereas Clerks 2, Jersey Girl, Red State, Tusk, Jay and Silent Bob reboot, those seem more like movies, whereas Chasing Amy and Clerks seem more like what you said, Eric. They're more like real life type of things, not documentarian style, but more reality based. Maybe that's what's missing out of some of the other movies.
No, clearly it is, because like any director, you're going to evolve. Your characters are going to evolve, and you're not going to get the same 4 or 5 people to star in every movie you ever do. You're going to take risks. You're going to try new actors and actresses, and sometimes you win, sometimes you fail. But the style of movie that was made in the 1990s is going to be different than a movie that's made in the 60s, the 70s, today.
True.
Every style of a director and a producer is going to be different. It's going to evolve. And I think he just hit his pinnacle. Every director does it. I mean, even the great ones, your Spielbergs, have a few bombs here and there, let's be honest. But I think in his case, he hit a core with a group of actors and actresses that really made you feel like you were part of this movie. And you were looking forward to that next one that was going to come out. And, it rolled for a couple years, but all great things come to an end.
I was thinking what you're saying about those later movies being movies, and I do think Chasing Amy, though, is in those type of movies, but it's a movie with great dialogue. I think it's shot like a movie, but it's really done really well. The problem that I think that Kevin Smith might have is he's gotten older. He doesn't have those conversations probably that he did when he was younger, as far as sitting down with people in their early 20s. They think they have all the world's issues resolved, and they sit down and they just talk about it. And so you have that dialogue. And I think as you get older, you get married, have kids, you're kind of taken away a little bit from that. So I don't think his dialogue probably is as sharp as it once was. And that's unfortunate because he did write some great dialogue. He is not a great director. His specialty is dialogue. People who write songs and write books and things of that nature, as you get in later in your career, it seems like you are having a harder time coming up with something different. Because he seems like having that issue, then he has to rely on being a director. And I don't think he has the director chops as, let's say, Cameron Crowe, as we reviewed earlier.
Well, the audience is going to be clearly different. The people that are going to like this movie that are in their 20 and 30-somethings in the 1990s are not the same 20 and 30-somethings that are alive in 2020.
Well, that's why I don't think he is a great director, because he doesn't seem to relate to people of all generations. He's only relating to the generations that he grew up with. And I think that's what,
Us, yeah.
Right. And I think that's what separates a great director from just an average director. And I'm not trying to be Kevin Smith bashing, because I appreciate Kevin Smith from where he came up. He's kind of self-taught. He went to school, but then he dropped out. And I feel like a lot of this is kind of he's learning on the fly. But he became very successful at the beginning. And I think that kind of maybe even hurt him in the long run.
Maybe even his relationship with Miramax might have hurt him a little bit too, in hindsight.
Yeah, truly. Talk about relationships. We didn't even mention that he was dating Joey Lauren Adams during this movie. That's kind of interesting. Directing your girlfriend.
That's got to be hard.
Yeah.
I did hear that there were times, because I guess Ben Affleck was living on Kevin's couch during the shooting of Chasing Amy. And I guess a lot of the times Kevin would hand pages of script to Joey Lauren Adams, and it would be like almost an apology to her for a fight that they had. That has to be mind-blowingly hard to do that. But I think, Ken, you brought up an interesting point as far as growing older. A lot of Chasing Amy and Clerks is their personal experiences with Kevin. And I don't know if he's been able to take his later life experiences and put them on the screen. That might be part of where the problem is. Like I said, he still speaks to me. That might be part of the problem too, is that he just hasn't taken the real life aspect. Like we said, Chasing Amy, he was dating Joey Lauren Adams. And a lot of this movie is personal. Maybe he needs to make a personal movie again, and maybe that would bring it back. This movie is definitely magic. There's no doubt about it for me. So, Eric, you were going to mention something about whether or not this movie could get made in 2020, especially with...
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, 1997, was this movie really ahead of its time when it was coming to some of the topics discussed in this? I mean, homosexuality, bisexuality, I mean, that's the constant theme of the movie. And especially today in 2020 with the Me Too movement and all the other protests that are going on amongst everything here. Do you think this is a movie that could be made today? And if it was made today, would it be even remotely successful?
It would be completely different. The epithets that are used by Banky, I mean, he uses the F word as far as referring to gay people. There's no way that gets into a movie today. It's a hurtful word. Every time I watch the movie, it hits me that we've come so far, which is a good thing. We've come so far as a society where that word is not used in polite society anymore.
He also uses the D word.
Yeah, and they use the C word too, which that's my least favorite word in the English language.
But these words are very common words used throughout the Kevin Smith movies. Let's be honest.
They are.
Yeah.
It's definitely a time capsule of a different time.
Yeah.
But you know what? It might not be that much of a time capsule. I think there's still people that actually say these words. Let's take a look at when these words are being said. These words are being said in private. That's why I think this movie actually holds up extremely well, if not even better now. It's really relevant. This movie being made right now might even do a little bit better than it did back then because of where we're at in our society now.
I don't think today's audience is really going to get Jay and Silent Bob, to be honest with you. It'd be like making a movie with Beavis and Butthead. It was an era. It was fun. But I don't think if you had any movies that were revolving around their character, that it would really hold up today. I don't think the reboot did very well, to be honest with you. And I didn't like the reboot.
It was all right. But I mean, the Jay and Silent Bob and Chasing Amy is barely in it. And even if you don't know who these characters are, Silent Bob has to say about his relationship is very important. And anybody could have said that. It just happens to be Jay and Silent Bob. You could take all the other movies that have Jay and Silent Bob. Chasing Amy is the one movie for me that could stand on its own and doesn't need anything else around it. It is that good of a movie.
True. And I think the movie could get made, and I think the movie could do well. I just think some of the language would definitely need to be changed because I don't think that
I don't know if that's true.
Come on now. There's no way you're going to use...
But this is
You're
a
not going to
movie
say
about
the F word in reference to gay people.
But this is a movie about guys who are naive, trying to get them to understand the world that we live in and understanding people of different sexual orientations. So I think if you take those words out, it has no bite. I think in this day and age where we're having issues with race and different ways of looking at life, if you take what really is hurting us in those areas and you take them out of the movie, then that movie doesn't have any real message. So I think you have to have those type of words in there. They're uncomfortable, but uncomfortable is what's going to make us change.
I think a lot of our generation have had life experience with people who are gay, and we realize how hurtful some of those words are. Okay, maybe I said it incorrectly, where the dialogue needs to be changed. I don't think a director today would include those words because they know how hurtful those words are. And that's our generation stepping up to the plate, so to speak, and understanding how hurtful they are. And let's be honest, the people that are using the F word as far as in relation to describing somebody who's gay, they're not good people. We'll put it this way, they're not somebody that I want to associate with.
And there's people out there, though. It would be naive to say that these words are...
They're not going to be going to see a Kevin Smith movie.
But we're not talking about this being now a Kevin Smith movie. We're talking about if this type of movie was made now, would it do well? And I think this type of movie it's important to have, especially now. That's what's so great about this movie. I think this is the one Kevin Smith movie that 30, 40 years down the road, even from now, is important because it shows relationships. It shows how people are treated. I think we learn from these type of movies, even making me think about my grade a little bit differently as I'm talking here, because I'm starting to really appreciate Chasing Amy for what it is as a standalone movie.
So I agree with actually both of you on this point. I think the movie could be made today. I mean, you can make any movie you want today. I don't think it would be as important as it was when it was made in 1997. I don't think, obviously, many of these words would be used in this movie. And I don't even think a director would even consider making a movie like this, to be honest with you. And I probably would not be a mainstream movie backed by a Miramax or a Universal. I don't know if they would go out on a limb and make a movie like this in today's environment. But I think for the time, this movie did well. I think it holds up well. I think it's a very important movie to watch. I think it really shows how strong of a director Kevin Smith was for this movie. This is obviously his best directed movie, hands down. I wish it could have went a little longer for him. I wish he would have made some movies that were pretty similar to these style movies in the 90s going into the 2000s. But, you know, society changes. We all grow up. And the things that were funny in the 90s to some people just are not funny today.
I agree.
So, Ted, you've got some interesting tidbits about this movie here you want to tell us about.
Yeah, I have a couple of interesting little nuggets here. One, the song that Alyssa sings at the club where they meet up, Joey Lauren Adams actually wrote that song. I think that's pretty interesting.
That's cool. And she really sang it too, right?
Yeah, she really sang it the whole bit. It's really kind of neat that she was able to do that. Although she, I guess, did write it as a country song because I guess she was into country music, but they decided to bring in somebody to actually kind of rock it up a little bit so it fit more with the theme of the movie.
You know, it's pretty sad that her career didn't flourish.
It is.
Yeah.
It really, really is. Then after she kisses her girlfriend and they go back to the table, if you think about it, you take a look at how they're all seated. The three of them are seated around this table. It looks familiar. The reason it looks familiar is because the whole scene of Holden and Banky and Alyssa at the table where Banky and her are comparing wounds.
Oh, like out of Jaws. Yeah.
It's almost beat for beat off of that scene in Jaws.
Oh, clearly.
Yeah, so that I thought that was really kind of an interesting thing. I guess that particular scene too was written for Mallrats with Gwen and TS and then Brody. All of those names have something to do with a character that's in that scene in Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, T.S. Quint.
Right? Exactly.
You know, I know we moved past a review, but I wanted to say that my third favorite scene was the discussion about the battle scars of, sexual
It's a classic scene, and it's another one of those scenes like we had mentioned before about how good of a director Kevin Smith in this movie. I don't know if it's intentional, but Holden and Banky are characters out of Catcher in the Rye. And if you look at Holden, his character is quite similar to the Holden character in Catcher in the Rye. With somebody like Kevin Smith, you would think that sometimes coincidences don't happen like that. And I know Ken had mentioned that this is his favorite Ben Affleck role. This is the first time in Ben Affleck's career that a director took him and essentially wrote a part just for him. I guess every part of the writing process was done with Ben as well. So when Kevin would finish part of the script, he would send it to Ben. It's not a complete collaboration, but everything was written with Ben in mind. And I think that's pretty cool. It's really interesting that Kevin was able to see how amazing Ben would end up being. He saw that talent. If you listen to the commentary track of the movie, they make a passing joke that Matt Damon wasn't there to record the commentary. And it's because they said, well, he's already off doing Matt Damon's stuff. So even then, they knew that Matt Damon was going to be as good as an actor as he is.
I've got an interesting thing to bring up here. As I'm recording this and looking at the DVD cover, in the movie itself, did Holden always have a goatee?
No. I'm glad you brought that up. That's another thing with that whole thing with Holden and the goatee thing. I hate that goatee on Ben Affleck. I want to shave it off so bad, it's not even funny. It takes away from him, I think, in a way. Maybe it's
on the cover of the DVD, he doesn't have a goatee.
I know, and it's like, that's the Holden that I wanted to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a couple of little things like that I thought were
That's
pretty interesting.
So we're coming to the end of the podcast about Chasing Amy. I'd like to ask the guys here what they think of the movie and give it a grade. Ted, what do you think?
My grade on this movie is an A. There's very little about this movie I don't like. I think this fits really well with the other three movies that we've reviewed of Kevin Smith's, and I think it proves that I like Kevin Smith a lot. This movie, for me, it holds up. It's definitely worth watching. I thought it was funny at the beginning of the episode where you guys mentioned that you hadn't watched it in a while. And this is a movie that I come back to maybe once or twice a year. And so it's highly rewatchable for me. It hits a lot of really good points. In ramping up with Kevin Smith in general, I think Kevin Smith is definitely one of my favorite directors. I know there's a lot of hit and miss, especially after Dogma. But I still like his voice. I think that he still has something to say. I don't think that he's just a voice for the 90s. He still has some gravitas still left to him. I admire him a lot, and I think that might play more into how I feel about him because I do admire him so much just as a human being. All in all, my opinion of the four movies, Chasing Amy and Clerks are probably going to be two of my favorites. And to say that Dogma and Mallrats fall into another category is really kind of unfair because I do like all four movies a lot. And I don't think my opinions have changed over the course of doing these 4 episodes on Kevin Smith. It's really reinforced that I really enjoy Kevin Smith's work.
How about you, Ken?
So this was a tough one for me as far as grading Chasing Amy. I feel this is Kevin Smith's best writing, his best directing. But at the last portion of the movie, the scene where he's talking about having a three-way, and that's his solution to getting his relationship back on track with Alyssa, is just plain old stupid. Doesn't make any sense. It frustrates me to no end. This is making my grading kind of difficult because I graded Clerks as a C, I graded Mallrats and Dogma as a B minus. This is somewhere in between those two, but I don't feel comfortable giving it like a C plus because I think it's better than that. It's better than that because Joey Lauren Adams does such a great job with her character, and I really, really enjoy her. Again, she has that Penny Lane character that draws me near to her, and I very much appreciate that. So I'm going to give it a B minus. It's a different movie though than Dogma or Mallrats that I've given a B minus to before. It's in its own classification. So maybe I have to do a different grading scale based on type of movies. But for now, this is a B minus. It's very enjoyable. If I were to talk about how I look at Kevin Smith, I feel like he hit his peak in the 90s, unfortunately. And I think that's just because he didn't get to learn from maybe somebody better, where most actors and directors and things of that nature, they go to school and they focus on that type of career. Kevin Smith kind of jumped into the deep end without a life preserver. And he did very well to start with. But as time has gone on, he's kind of unfortunately shown that lack of being a director. And of course, I said this earlier, his writing is kind of dried up a little bit. He's really good at his podcast. I enjoy listening to him talk about superheroes, comic books. He's very entertaining. Eric, you brought up An Evening with Kevin Smith.
They're incredibly great. He is a storyteller. You put him live in front of an audience with a group of people and you just shoot him random questions that he's not prepared to answer. He's a pro.
And I think that's where his gifts are now. I think his gifts are doing those type of things, podcast. I admire him. I really do. And I feel bad that sometimes I'm giving him these B minuses, C's. I actually admire Kevin Smith. I think he's what we all wish could happen to us. I wish him well, and I hope he does come out with something like Mallrats 2 or Clerks 3, that it is something that we can enjoy and brings him back to what his heyday was in the 90s.
Okay, that's interesting. I kind of agree more with Ted when it comes to the movie itself. I think this is an incredibly good movie. I've watched it, like I said, 3 times this week, and I enjoy it even more every time. I actually own a VHS copy of it that I remember buying and watching when it came out. That's how long ago it's been. Initially, I was going to give this movie probably a B, but as I've been talking this out and watching it and really comparing and contrasting with the other Kevin Smith movies, this is a wonderful movie. This is a great movie altogether. There's very few things I can find wrong with it. And the scene at the end, Ken, that I know you don't like, that's the exact conclusion that someone like Holden would come up with. I would expect him to come up with some asinine, this will solve everything kind of scene. So for me, it actually played out well. I give this movie a solid A, and it could probably my second favorite Kevin Smith movie. I'm really teetering because those first 4, they're all such great movies. It's really hard now to put one atop. But if we're talking directing movies, this is Kevin Smith's best directed movie. The one thing I do agree with Ken on is I feel that when it comes to popular culture, movie making, I think he hit his peak in the 90s. I think maybe he peaked at Dogma. He tried to relive it in Jersey Girl, and the audience just didn't go with him. We all grow older. Everything changes. I don't think he is what he once was. I like his podcast. I like his evenings with Kevin Smith. The guy's a great storyteller, and I think he is a great director. But the movies that he made in the 90s are not movies that are going to be made today, and the audiences have changed. And that's how I end it.
Okay, so we would like to thank you all for joining us on this month of October featuring Kevin Smith. We enjoyed doing this, and we look forward to doing this again. Ted, how can they find us on social media?
We do have a Facebook group out there, which is the Drive-In Double Feature Movie Review Podcast. You can also catch us on Twitter at in_feature. Make sure that you catch all the podcast episodes on Anchor, on Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And be sure to rate and review us and give us a 5-star rating, and we'll definitely appreciate that.
What's coming up in November?
In November, we're going to look at 4 movies of Stanley Kubrick.
Ooh, Stanley.
My favorite director.
One of the best.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for doing this month. We look forward to the month of November. I guess it's time for us to say goodbye.
See you at the movies.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.